called the Da Vinci of our time. What do you say to that?
Absolutely ridiculous. I don't paint.
You said your other nickname, the Merchant of Death.
That's not bad. They say the best weapon is one you never have to fire. I prefer the weapon you only need to fire once.
Right, welcome everyone. This is episode 54 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I am Chris Phelps, and my good friend is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hi, Chris, and hi to our listeners out there. Welcome to the Comics in Motion podcast. What we like to do here is we like to review media like movies and TV shows that are based on comic books. Myself, I'll be looking at the media from the perspective of a long-time comic book reader, and my co-host Chris will be reviewing mainly from that media perspective, and we'll walk through our given choice of the week and give our thoughts on it. What we also like to do is we also like to spoil the hell out of everything we review, so if you haven't watched our choice of the week, I'd advise you to proceed with caution. What we also love is we love it when you can head over to Apple Podcasts or your podcast catcher of choice and drop us a 5-star review. This helps us grow the show and gets us out to other listeners. So, Chris, we've started off with another new year, and in terms of comic book movies and TV shows, it's just getting busier. There's just more and more coming out. So, what's caught your eye from the news this week?
The main one, I think, is the second trailer that I've seen for Captain Marvel. I think it's sort of pricked my interest a bit better because there's the interaction with Samuel L. Jackson, which hasn't come across in the first trailer. Obviously, in the other Avengers and that, he's more of a peripheral figure who glues everything together. But in this one, it looks like he's going to be one of the main sort of superheroes. So there's a good bit of joking and buddy stuff with Captain Marvel, which I really liked in this second trailer. It's got me more intrigued than I was. But as I said last week, and as I've said a couple of times, this film for me is just a vehicle to get to the Avengers. But I want to be proven wrong because I did enjoy Ant-Man v Wasp last year and Ant-Man, which I wasn't that. I'd sort of avoided the first one. So it'd be interesting to see how this all comes together and where she is in the Avengers, having, spoiler alert, being the pager that was dropped at the end of Infinity War. So we'll see on that one.
So it is going to be interesting, this one, isn't it? Because it is set back in the 90s, and I believe it's going to be a bit of a Nick Fury kind of origin story as well. So, that's intriguing. It's also, there's been lots of events where Nick Fury could have pressed the Captain Marvel button, it seems, and you sort of think, well, why didn't he do it sooner? So I'm hoping that, the Captain Marvel movie might go some way, however that ends, or the end credit scenes might help us understand why did he wait till Infinity War, till he's just about to be dusted, to actually press the SOS button.
Yeah. Again, like you say, hopefully it's explained, but that's the one at the moment I'm really interested in coming up. We've also got in this next week, Dave, that I'm really going to get my teeth into is The Punisher. That drops on the 18th of January. And I reckon I'm hopefully going to binge watch that, at least if not all of it, half of it within a couple of days, because I'm really interested in what they do. And if this is the full stop on another Netflix Marvel property, how they're going to finish it off. Maybe this one will have more of an ending to it, Dave, if they actually are going to park it.
I mean, if they cancel Daredevil, I imagine they're going to cancel Punisher as well. But Let's see, because it's grittiness turned up to 11, isn't it? And I'm really excited for this one as well. And I have to say, the guys who do the trailers for Punisher just absolutely nail the music. So I remember in series 1, it jumped out. They played One by Metallica, so very Metallica obviously being a heavy metal band, doing very heavy rock music, but it starts off very slow and acoustic little guitar pieces. For this one, they used one of my favorite bands from the old 90s grunge time, so Alice in Chains. Again, much more on the metal side of grunge. And I just think the music just fits that trailer absolutely perfectly. And so I think we get to see a bit more of the Punisher with his huge kind of skull on his chest. We haven't really seen much of that in the first couple of seasons. So I think we're probably going to get now, he is the Punisher. So through series 2, he was becoming the Punisher. Whereas now I think the reins are going to be off.
Yeah, I agree. I think this could maybe get close to Daredevil, Dave. Let's see. And I highly rated that series 3 last year. So, yeah, very good. What about yourself, Dave? Anything you've picked up on or you're intrigued with this last week?
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of things coming up, haven't we? And I hadn't noticed this until this week because we were due to review Hellboy next week. So Hellboy was supposed to be out today, and when it wasn't out, I was like, "What's going on?" It turns out it's been pushed back to April. Now the news only broke out about this in December, and late December at that. Pushing on for Christmas time, and I'm always a bit nervous, for any project that's delayed that much, that close to when it's supposed to be finished, that there's something not right there. So whether it can't be reshoots this late in the day, but I can only think it didn't test very well, and maybe they're retouching up some CGI or something like that. It just seems odd that less than a month from release, it's now delayed 4 months. So hopefully that's okay. I'm not that bought into it from the trailer, but we'll obviously watch it, and I'll go in with an open mind.
Yeah, I think you've just explained exactly how I'm feeling about it. That trailer was absolute dog doo-doo, as they say, Dave. It was terrible. So we'll see. We mentioned it a couple of episodes ago. No, good stuff.
I think the other thing I'll just mention as well is so kind of good news, because the future of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has been a little bit uncertain with everything that went on with James Gunn and the fact that Dave Bautista was, lobbying. He was fully behind and with James Gunn. Obviously, he'd given him his big break, really, his first major role. And so Kevin Feige, who's basically that Marvel universe architect, he's confirmed that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will definitely still be happening. So for me, I've loved the first two. I think that's really good news.
I do absolutely love it. I was late to the party, as anyone who's listened to the podcast, and I've literally in the last year watched the first two. Fantastic, especially the first one. The first one is outstanding. The comedy element is up there with some of the best. I think it's brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to that one, Dave. Definitely.
Yeah, and something else that caught my eye this week. DC Animation apparently is rumored to be working on Superman the Red Son. Now, again, obviously myself coming from the comic background, you coming more from the media background, Superman the Red Son is a Mark Millar story. And it's basically, it's an alternate universe, and it takes the concept that, well, what would happen if Superman actually landed in the old Soviet Union instead of America? And it's a whole story exploring what would Superman be, if he was if he landed over there. So I think it's a really great story. It's one of the best, in my opinion, best Superman stories. Again, it's not really the main universe, but it's still really good anyway. So yeah, I think if that does come to fruition, we should definitely review that one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Dave. That's interesting, that as well. And one thing we had picked up on this week, Dave, it's really good, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, it's hit 277 million at the box office, but there's rumours that'll probably please you more than me, that there is possible spin-offs of Spider-Ham and Spider-Man Noir. I'd be interested how they go about that, but also listening to some of my podcasts, that MMA podcast, some of the big fighters have been watching Spider-Verse over Christmas with the family when they've had a bit of doubt.
All right.
And some of the ones who do the podcast are like ex-fighters who are doing a lot of shows and that. And I've heard 2 or 3 of them now absolutely rave over it, saying how good it is and what such a good film irrespective of it being animated. And that's because we do this show, people come to you, don't they, as if you're the fountain of knowledge and the sort of oracle. But I've had a lot of my friends and family, and the thing I point them in the direction of is it's not just an animated, film. It's an actual story with a proper film you could watch. It's so good. And in the way they've characterized all, the people in it, there's a connection there with the audience. And I think that's very, very rare, Dave. So again, nothing but plaudits for that film. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it is good. And I'll definitely be getting this one on Blu-ray, and I'd like to watch it a couple more times without that surprise factor, because I think I'd mentioned in our review, when we looked at this movie before, Sony haven't done a fantastic job really of, looking back of the Spider-Man property. And so, this, along with Venom, which, some people don't really rate, but I think we both enjoyed it, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think certainly commercially it's been a massive success, Venom has. So I think, this was a surprise for me. So watching it when I'm not when I don't have the surprise will be interesting as well. But I've certainly heard that the same thing that you've heard. Anyone who talks about this Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is glowing about it.
Yeah, and anybody who's in doubt, just go and watch it. Even if you're not a comic book fan or you're just invested in the films, the Marvel films, like myself, who's purely come from the movie TV side. It's fantastic, and it tells so many stories, and it increases your knowledge. I mean, you're luckily, because of the information and knowledge you have yourself and reading the comics, Dave, it's so blown my mind, as doing the show and that, because it's all about different versions of Robin. We know all this when Jamie was on and stuff, and Batman Begins and that. But it really is an interesting concept that I must admit I'm finding really, really hard to get my head round. But it's just good. It's just great to say that that they can change the universe to fit the story or whatever. And I think it's testament to Marvel, and obviously testament to the writers and directors of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must admit, a lot of the characters are all in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. They were created in this last 10 years. So these are all, for this generation, if you like. So, we've grown up with the core characters, if you like. Whereas, and less so Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham was around when I was a kid, one of my personal favorites. But, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Gwen, these were created in the last few years. So it's good to see them brought to screen so quickly from being created on the page.
Yeah, good stuff.
Have you been to the movies with your free with your unlimited pass?
Yeah, I've one I watched last week. I'll touch on that in a second. I am supposed to be going to watch the Oliver Harding, Stan Laurel, standing out.
Oh yeah,
it's due out this weekend, so the weekend 11th of Jan, and we are supposed to be going to see it either today or probably over the weekend. And I'm genuinely looking forward to it. Reviews have been fantastic from what I've seen. Obviously, I've not spoiled it or anything like that, but genuinely, Steve Coogan is the standout person in it, to be honest. Getting the plaudits as Stan Laurel. But yeah, we did go and see last week Fantastic Beasts 2. I'm glad that I had my pass and it was free, because I thought it was a real letdown from the first one. I thought the first one was a great extension and creation of a new story arc in the Harry Potter world. It's set obviously in the 20s in New York, the first one. This second one is now sort of set a little bit between New York and back at sort of Hogwarts and in France and Paris and stuff. But it just doesn't grab you. And there's a few bits in it that we come out of it. Jordan is a massive Harry Potter fan, and she watched the first one finally just before we went last week, and she loved it. And so she was actually really into this, thinking it's going to be good. And we all come out like, is that it? It just seemed to end quite abruptly, which is leading into a trilogy already, Dave, that I think at the moment they could have just parked it with big battles, and they just seemed to go away from it at the end. It was a very strange ending.
That's quite disappointing, that, because I quite like the first one. I mean, I'm not hugely invested in that Harry Potter universe, but, I can watch it and enjoy it. So this is one that I could have waited for, and I will wait for on the streaming services. So I think, I will watch it, but yeah, disappointing, I guess, that it's not lived up to the first one, because I did really enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, don't take my word. You might watch it and really enjoy it. There's some great set pieces, and the CGI again, he's knocks it out of the park, Dave. It's some of the best you've ever seen, but it just felt like it was missing something to me. I can't put my finger on it. Whether I rewatch it, a bit like what happened with Solo, second time round it was a lot better, but we'll see. But I would advise you to watch it. It's not a bad film, but it'll never be something I'd buy or whatever. It'll just be something I'd watch maybe if it was on TV now. Very strange, very strange.
Yeah, so I've not been out to the cinema to watch anything in this last week, but I've caught a few things at home. I watched the remake of Baywatch. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, it's all right actually.
It is firmly tongue in cheek. I mean, old Zac Efron, the way he's got himself into shape there reminds me very much of myself. No, he's built like a racehorse, isn't he? Him and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. But I just and the fact I didn't know the Hoff was in it. So the fact that he makes an appearance in there as well, he came on screen. Oh, it's it's Hasselhoff playing Mitch. It was it was a lot of fun, wasn't it? But probably. It pokes fun at the fact that, they're just lifeguards. Why are they off on investigating stuff? Yeah. So Zac Efron's character is playing that point of view character, isn't it? So if people are drowning, we save them. That's what we do. We're not off, being the police.
Yeah, because when we were kids, like I had my Saturday nights were sorted. It was a bit of Baywatch, Pamela Anderson, Carmen Electra, sorry. And then it was a case of Jet from Gladiator straight after. Very much Alan Partridge TV what she gave. But when you think of it now, as a 40-year-old man thinking, why was a lifeguard getting better results than the FBI or the CIA?
Yeah.
Or when the CIA come, they were happy to send Mitch Buchanan along with him on these death-defying things, and all he's armed with. He's a red floaty. He never had a gun or anything, but they always seem to crack some drug den, didn't they? Or, some drug ring in the sea and all that. And when you think of it, there's no logical thing. I mean, I'm sure the guys on Miami Beach and that who are lifeguards have probably never seen anything maybe other than a dolphin fin now and again. It was a great TV though, Dave. So I invested in this, and I like the fact it did go down the route of the Starsky and Hutch type thing, where they were sort of making it into a parody of itself. Now the Starsky and Hutch TV shows were very, David Soul, Michael Paul Glazer, they were very, very serious for the 70s. Huggy Bear, it was all the way it was done. They tackled a lot of good things, and when they remade it with Ben Stiller, I liked it because of the car and they had the jumper on, and it was all thingy with him and Owen Wilson, but then it went too far the other way, and that's what I didn't want with this. But this one was I just thought it was stupid. He got away with it, I thought.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. The other thing I watched was that film Split with James McAvoy.
All right.
Now, this was a little bit of homework. It's not really based on a comic book movie as such, but it is very comic book. So it's produced by M. Night Shyamalan, who produced Unbreakable.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially, it's the second in a trilogy, if you like, because we've got Glass coming up very shortly, and that's going to be the third piece. So basically, the three parts to it are Unbreakable, Split, and then you're going to have Glass. So I'd seen Unbreakable years ago, but I hadn't seen Split, and it's not from any of the advertisements or anything. So from all the write-ups and stuff, it's not obvious that it's anything to do with Unbreakable. And it's the only reason I'm spoiling it a little bit because it's right at the end of the movie and it becomes clear. And I mean, the last few seconds, it becomes clear that it's part of this same universe. But I've seen it quite a lot on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. So I think the secret's out there. So yeah, a really good movie, and it's very much like there is a character. So Professor X, Charles Xavier, in the comics, he does have a son called Legion, and there's a TV series. We haven't looked at it, but there's a Legion TV series, and basically he has in his head all these different personalities. There was another one with John Cusack a few years ago. I think it was called Identity or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically, the very much the same idea where you've got, imagine lots of little people who are in your head, and at different times they step into the light and they're the ones controlling the body. So, the outside world just sees this person who's got multiple identities. But, the way it's portrayed, certainly in the comics, Legion, he takes on the powers of the person who's controlling the body. So it's not just like someone who's a bit mad. Can I say that? So yeah, and they've taken that same idea. Now it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because James McAvoy is playing a character like Charles Xavier's son, and he's also, in the X-Men universe, he is Charles Xavier. So weird little connection there. But I'd recommend that one. It's very much more on the horror side spectrum, or horror/thriller. A little bit of a Silence of the Lambs type of thing, maybe. But yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. I quite enjoyed that one, and like I say, hadn't really heard any fanfare or anything about how good it was.
I've never seen it. I've never seen Unbreakable either, Dave, to be honest. So I'll have to watch him.
Oh, we'll have to watch that. So with Glass coming out, I think we might have to bump that out of the list.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to get it in there, Dave.
Why don't we? So an on-the-fly decision, because I was thinking, because we were going to review Hellboy next week, I was going to insert something else in there. Someone had responded to us on Facebook asking about, like the old Bill Bixby Hulks and old 70s Spider-Man and stuff like that. So I was going to go really retro, but I think if you've not watched Unbreakable, and with Glass coming up, you can get away without seeing Split.
Yeah,
I think, but Unbreakable sets the scene for everything. So let's do that one next week.
Good. Nice one, Dave. Nice one.
Now, just before we get into our review, I would like to bring to you a little promo from one of our other podcast friends. We'll be right back with you after this short break.
Hi, this is Mouse.
I'm Weens.
And we have the Mouse and Weens podcast.
Come listen.
We're a couple of sisters.
It's great.
Is this the Muppets?
Yep.
I'm a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a mom in San Diego with a bunch of kids.
I'm single and alone because I'm an adult baby. Go ahead. Quick.
She's in Hollywood.
All
and
right,
she's
listen
awesome.
to us. Come on. I don't know. Go. Give 7 seconds.
Life, love, and pubic hair, people. Come take a listen.
See you later. Bye.
So, Dave, this week's review, we are going to be back in time to 2008, the start of the MCU. We sort of mentioned this and alluded to it on a few podcasts, but we're going to go with Iron Man.
Yep, and one of my favorites, I have to say. I'll put it right out there, straight off the bat. Now, I say favorites in terms of the movie, but one of my favorite characters as well. Marvel's Iron Man first appeared back in Tales of Suspense number 39 back in 1963. So if I said to you, Chris, in the early 60s, we created this character and it's a Marvel character, who do you think was the creator? Or who do you think are the creators?
Stan Lee, I would have said, and his friend, Mr. Kirby.
Yep. That's the one. That's the one. So now there's actually a few. It's more of a collaboration, this. So after that first wave, so you basically had Stan Lee created Fantastic Four, Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man, of course. Things are starting to get really busy, and they're getting more and more people in. And Stan is trying to write all these various books. So he became more of he raised up a level, and then you had other people kind of doing the more granular writing. So Stan took on a role of like plotter, if you like. So really joining up those, or setting out those big leaps in between what needs to happen for the story. And then the writer who did this one is a guy called Larry Lieber, and the artist. So Jack Kirby did the character design, but the artist for the actual issue is a guy called Don Heck. Now, all of those guys are credited with being part of the Iron Man creation team, if you like. Now, there isn't. There is a fifth name who I believe should really be credited as well, but that's a bit of a debate, and I'll get your input, what you think about it as well after this. So Stan Lee had said, and I'm not going to do a Stan Lee voice because I've tried on my own and I can't do it.
At least you're honest.
Yeah. I'll just get it right out there. But he said, I think I gave myself a dare. It was at the height of the Cold War. The readers were young readers. If there was one thing they hated, it was war. It was the military. So I got a hero who represented to the 100th degree. He was a weapons manufacturer. He was providing weapons to the army. He was rich. He was an industrialist. I thought it would be fun to take that kind of character that nobody would like, none of our readers would like, and shove him down their throats and make them like him. And he became very popular. So, again, unfortunately, God bless you, Stan Lee, but I do like that, you know, he's got a passion for it. You know, he's one of the most, if not the most influential person, if we look across comics right now. You know, and unfortunately passed on this last year. But you know, just having a bit of fun with himself there, just to just to get people to like him, and they shouldn't really like him at all. Now, in that first issue, Tales of Suspense, we see that origin story, which, you know, we see a bit, you know, we see in the movie, we see this big bulky grey suit. Now in the second appearance, so Tales of Suspense 40, it was replaced. He sprayed it gold basically, but it was still that same Mark 1 suit. And it wasn't until issue 48 that we got a more distinctive slimmed down red and gold armor. Now that was designed by Steve Ditko, who was the co-creator of Spider-Man. So, like I say, the Marvel offices at this time, they're getting a bit more busy, you know, and people are working together more collaboratively. So that's why it becomes a little bit more debatable when you try and put a creator label on a single person. And I just think if you look at that initial armor, it doesn't look great. I don't think. And I think it really is what everyone now, I'm sure, recognizes is that red and gold armor. And that was, like I say, that was down to Steve Ditko. And, you know, I have to say, Steve Ditko, he obviously really had an eye for a good costume design, because, you know, that whole Spider-Man, the red and blue, that was all Steve Ditko as well. So, I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, he's 9 issues later, we see that armor. So what do you think? I think he should be classed as one of the creators, because he's created that character that we know. What do you think, Chris?
No, I agree, Dave. I mean, it's like, I suppose I'm going to go all David Brent now with an analogy, but it's like buying a Ford Fiesta in 1981. It's a Ford Fiesta, but you buy it in 1991 and it's a lot better designed and drives a lot better. So it's still... This is a terrible analogy, Dave. I hope to God you've got the volume off and you're laughing. But what I'm saying is it's an evolution of the character. So that evolution of the character is the one that in this day and age, everyone loves and knows as, don't they? If he had carried on being this big, bulky, grey sort of, you know, in the suit he had in the first appearance, in, you know, Tales of Suspense, it might not resonate with people. The colours stand out. Well, like you said, you're so right. The red and the blue is Spider-Man. It's synonymous with Spider-Man. Superman, the red and yellow of the S, you know, it's all colours. Red stands out more for some reason as a sort of superhero, doesn't it? Especially when they've got these suits on. So for me, I agree. He should get full accreditation with Stan Lee. Even though I think Stan Lee, what that paragraph you read out is absolutely amazing to be thinking that, Dave. What a mind. But yes, you've got to give him at least a slice of the credit for Iron Man, definitely.
Yeah, certainly a big influencer, if not part of that creative team. Just a couple of other things to mention. So it's just a sign of the times that his origin has changed a little bit, just in terms of the setting. So when he was first created, it was based in the Vietnam War. In the 90s, it was retold as part of the Gulf War, and then in the 2000s, it's updated to be Afghanistan. Now, Iron Man is a founding member of the Avengers. Now, he's never been, up until this movie, I don't think he was really in the public consciousness like, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. He was always part of that second tier, but certainly in terms of the comics, as I mentioned to you before, definitely one of my favorite characters, and right there at the start with the Avengers. Now, he's ranked third in IGN's top 50 Avengers list. So there's only Thor and Captain America that, appear higher than him. And also 12th in their list of top 100 comic book heroes. So that, again, that's pretty high. So I think certainly now, I'd said, in terms of the comics and the public consciousness, I think he's probably in that second tier. But in my mind, at least, Iron Man is absolutely one of those A-listers now. Now, Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about the movie background?
Of course, mate. Of course. Yep. So development-wise, we're going back to 1990, where they were going to adapt a big screen version of Iron Man. It probably wasn't a bad thing that a guy called Stuart Gordon was given the budget to make it a B movie, Dave, which very much could have ended up like the Fantastic Four. Now, for reviewing purposes, it would have been fantastic, but for actual credibility of the character, like as you said, because he wasn't a real household name superhero like the Superman, Spider-Man's, Hulk's, Batman's, it could have probably ruined him. So it's quite interesting. They didn't go down that route. By 1996, 20th Century Fox had acquired the rights. And then there was even talk, which is quite interesting as a comic book fan, and even though he's an actor, and we've had a bit of a ribbing at him, but Nicolas Cage was in the running to play Iron Man around 97. And then the back end of 98, Tom Cruise was interested in playing Iron Man. But then things took a bit of a change. They started developing a TV version, which was actually co-written by Stan Lee with Jeff Vinter. That was for Fox, Dave. But again, this is all around the time of the old Nick Fury. Now, we know Nick Fury was supposedly, Stan Lee told David Hasselhoff that he was the ultimate Nick Fury. Now, Stan Lee was involved on that TV show, so I'm quite glad that that never came to fruition. As much as he's a great creator in the comics and that, I'm not really, I think I would have been sold watching it now, so it could have been a bit of a disaster. So luckily that didn't happen. So he got canned from about 98 till 2005, and then Marvel Studios obviously started with the blueprint of the MCU and bringing things together, and they wanted to bring Iron Man as his own independent character, get that sort of exposure to him, because, you know, he's only really famous in the comic book world and the cartoons. So it was interesting. Now, one of the interesting things with this, Dave, was Mark Millar was involved in this as well. Now, obviously, there wasn't just Mark Millar. There was a few other people. Brian Bendis, I don't know if you know, Joe Quesada, which I know we've mentioned before. Yeah. Axel Alonso, Ralph Macchio as well, Dave, who was actually Chachi out of Happy Days. He was involved. Oh, he must do some sort of comic work, which is good. But they were all interested because to come on it. Now, Jon Favreau, he was actually the director. So around about 2006, he was getting his team together. And having worked on like the Daredevil with Avi Arad, he was like, right, let's get together. Let's get this going. He wanted a film, even though it was going to be a superhero film, he wanted to take elements of James Bond, you know, that sort of spy movie, RoboCop with obviously the suit, this sort of invincibility once he's got the suit on, the exposure of it. As you said before in the comic background, you know, they changed it from Vietnam to Afghanistan because they wanted it to be current. They didn't want it to be a backstory going to the late 60s, early 70s. It had to be now, you know, to sort of kick off, you know, the idea, this roadmap of the MCU. Now, with the success of around this time of the X-Men, Spider-Man, we were starting to get the offshoots of the Wolverine origins. They wanted to hit it out of the park. So there were obviously several rewrites of the scripts, and they didn't actually want Robert Downey Jr. Now, Robert Downey Jr. only got there. This sounds, I know for me and you, it's a lot of money, but for this role, he only got $500,000 for playing, because he was an actor on the down roll, wasn't he? He'd had a lot of trouble when he'd been in jail. He'd had a lot of, well publicized problems with drink and drugs and stuff like that. So Favreau was adamant he wanted Downey Jr., whereas the studio didn't want him because of all the problems that came with it, all the baggage. Because this turned his career around, did it? He had like Sherlock Holmes at the time with Guy Ritchie. But Favreau actually thought that Downey Jr., because of his faults, and because he's so open and he's learned from his past, he's a reformed character, he thought that fit Tony Stark remit better than anyone else, because he could bring a real element to the character. He's not having to totally act it up. He could draw from experiences in his life. So he pushed for Robert Downey Jr., hence why he didn't get a lot of money for this. I mean, it doesn't matter now, obviously.
So yeah, I had heard that Terrence Howard had, he was the highest paid actor. And I think that probably, led to him being, that Colonel Rhodes character being recast for the second movie, because that's quite odd, because he'd won an Oscar, hadn't he? So he gave a bit of credibility. But I think, it's all with hindsight. But Robert Downey Jr., especially at that time, because he was kind of tainted, if you like, and people didn't want to touch him, to have that, to play that alcoholic Tony Stark, who is flawed, but ultimately is trying to do the right thing, I just thought was a brilliant piece of casting.
Yeah. You hear about it when we've talked about this. I do the movie background and the researching and that, and then you read about who's up for these roles. And like I say, one of the most daft ones we've talked about is Tony Danza, who was nearly Superman in Superman 3, which would have been absolutely ridiculous from a few episodes ago, episode 50.
I think he'd make a better one than Nick Cage, to be fair.
Yeah, probably we've seen that suit. But again, Favreau actually got it right. He wanted Downey Jr. for all his, warts and all and stuff. And I think that works. Now, obviously, box office-wise, Dave, at the time, it was an absolute success. It knocked it out of the park. It made 318 million in the US and Canada, and only 266 million in all of the territories, which in this day and age, it's actually the other way. But it was such a success, such an American icon, the way they portrayed Iron Man. It was just money train over in America and Canada. And at the time, it was only behind The Dark Knight and Indiana Jones as well in the cinemas. Opening weekend, at the time, it was the highest earning superhero film in its opening weekend, which is really good. Now, this obviously was before The Dark Knight came out, but for the year, it was third, which is really good. Now, critically, again, 93% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is absolutely top draw. And that's based on 274 reviews, which again is outstanding, Dave. Now, it's a 7.7 user rating. Again, that's totally above average. And when even some of the films that we've rated as Asgard and that this, whatever we give this score, it's probably one of the highest user rating ones. Now, on Metacritic, it's at 79 out of 100. Again, fantastic. And that's based on about 38 significant reviews. And then on the audience review, which we've said before, it's at an A+, Dave. So it, again, totally hit it. And it was a complete success for what kickstarted the MCU. So I mean,
it's easy to talk about it now. It's all with hindsight, but especially learning about what could have been. I mean, can you imagine what a 1994 Fantastic Four style of movie this Iron Man would be? Probably cardboard suited Iron Man.
Tim Foyle.
So, the fact that, I mean, Marvel had some real financial difficulties going through the 90s, nearly went, I think they filed for bankruptcy, but never actually, closed the doors, fortunately. And so they'd been licensing off their A-listers, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, they were all kind of licensed out. So what they were left with was, still a big library of other characters, but no one that was immediately marketable. Now, I'd heard that they were actually going to go ahead with Captain America as, that was going to be the first thing. And the idea of launching the MCU, I think it was still more of an ambition than a tangible thing that was going to happen. But they wanted to start off with these movies with Captain America, I think, and they had a little focus group of kids, and they ended up, from the feedback they got from the kids, they were all, you know, well up for Iron Man. So it's like, okay, well, we'll start off with Iron Man then. And I think, yeah, it all seems so obvious now, doesn't it? But back in 2008, and what a great year for comic book movies, you know, getting The Dark Knight and Iron Man out in that same year. So, yeah, it all looks pretty obvious when you look back. But should we go into our review? Okay, so we open up with Tony, and he's in Afghanistan with the army, isn't he? And we get this scene, and again, I remember watching this for the first time, just thinking, yep, that's Tony Stark. Within that first 2 minutes of this opening scene, where he's having a bit of back and forth between him and the soldiers, and you know, I've got to say, Chris, one of the things I love about Robert Downey Jr., and it's not just when he's doing Iron Man, it's in pretty much everything that he's been in, with the exception of Weird Science, probably, that he just bounces off anyone. Absolutely anyone who's on the screen, he has a great rapport with and chemistry with. You know, in some, what was it we were watching when we looked at like Batman Begins, and we said about Christian Bale and what's the name? The actress.
Oh, Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes, and they just had zero chemistry together. Robert Downey Jr. just always seems to have chemistry with anyone, and he has a good bit of banter, doesn't he, with the army, and you know that they're a bit intimidated by him. I love as well the rock music. You know, that's a bit of theme for Iron Man in this cinematic universe. So he opens up with a bit of AC/DC's Back in Black. Again, just fits perfectly, and obviously we're in this story, he's very much the industrialist, isn't he? He's very confident of himself, trying to sell his Jericho missile to the army. Again, fairly impressive. You can see whatever time in the morning it is, he's always got a drink. So it doesn't call out in this movie his alcoholism, but it's hinted at very much. You know, he's got a little case of little martinis, it looks like, in there. And what did you make to this whole opening piece, Chris?
I love it. Absolutely love it. I love the bit where the army start off and they're very intimidated by him, which is quite ironic, can't he? He's sat there in his suit and looking slick, and one of the guys eventually plucks up the courage when he's sort of settled him down, and the lady who's driving the SUV that they're in, or the Hummer, she's very sort of hard line, isn't she? Tough soldier, and he starts cracking jokes, and even she melts. And once she melts, she's obviously the leader of the two guys. It all just turns into just a bit of banter between them all. And there's a section where he says, "Can I have a picture?" So obviously 10 years ago, selfies weren't really a thing.
Yeah.
Pulls the camera out, but the guy does the peace sign, and he says to just very quick, you've got to listen to some of the stuff he says, which I really love, is he goes, no gang signs. So the guy puts his hand down like this, and then he goes, "No, I'm only joking, do it." And he does it again, the peace sign, but it's all, even now, it's still a relevant line. And it's funny because it's so quick. You've got to really listen to what he's saying sometimes. It's very, very clever writing, and he delivers it brilliantly.
And I'd love to know just how much of this is in the script and how much is it just Downey Jr., because he just the sharpness, the way he comes back with these lines, it's just fantastic. And there's only one thing I think that dates this movie, and it's at that point where they're taking a bit of a selfie. Again, I don't think in 2008 they called them selfies, but he says, "I don't want to see this on your MySpace page."
Yeah.
That's the only thing. But I love just before that, he says, "Is it cool if I take a picture with you?" He says, "Yeah, it's very cool."
Yeah.
it just you can't help but warm to him, and you know, he's got that kind of that confidence and arrogance, but you can't help but warm to him as well. And you know, a lot of people, you know, it repulses you, doesn't it? When someone's really arrogant, it's a bit of a repulsive thing, but he somehow nails that confidence and belief. And you know, he gets asked, doesn't he, by one of the guys, is it true you did all 12 months of the swimsuit calendar or something like that? Again, he's playing up his womanizing tendencies as well. He said, well, you know, me and, was it February or something like that, had a scheduling conflict, but luckily, you know, there was another month that was twins. So, but yeah, all very jovial and very funny there. But I mean, it suddenly turns a bit sour, doesn't it? So they're attacked, they're ambushed, and you know, it gets quite brutal. And I've called out this movie on, you know, some of the other things that we've reviewed, because it takes a long time to get going. You know, when we looked at Superman 1, it was 50 minutes before we saw Superman, so there was no action at all. And I just think this is perfect, this opening, that you get a bit of fun, you know, with, I mean, that's more to do with Downey Jr., I think. But then you're straight in there with the action, and you know, he runs out. It looks like all the people who he's just having a bit of a laugh with are killed, and then he runs off. But then a bomb drops right by his foot, pretty much, and he can see the Stark Industries logo on it, and he sort of starts to run back, but he gets taken out by it. So I just thought, absolutely brilliant. You know, I'd give this 10 out of 10 straight away. In terms of how do you open up a movie, I just thought this was perfect.
Yeah, I think what you've said, Dave, is very true. With the different variations of comic heroes, villains, different characters we've reviewed over these episodes. One thing we said, and some of the ones that we reviewed poorly, was why wasn't it an origin story? Why wasn't it, instead of, like you say, having a 45, 50-minute bit of a mini drama type thing where there's just nothing going on other than building this character up, and then you might get 20 minutes of action, the end. This, from the get-go, sets it right. It's an origin story that flicks between timelines, but it doesn't take it away from you. It's giving you everything you need about Tony Stark, about where he's from. You know, the action's there. It's gruesome. He's in a war-torn, country. Everything's going on. And I did like the bit when the bomb goes off, when he's lay there, and he's obviously got some sort of vest on it that saved him to a point, but it's still coming through his shirt.
Yeah.
And that at the time, and especially the way the army people got taken out as well, the soldiers were absolutely decimated, which is very unheard of. But just going back quickly, a little side note, I do think because of his delivery and the way the one-liners were put in, Dave, this film, despite everyone else, this film set the tone for the Fours, Captain America, the Hulk, Banner, the way they do send each other up, Hawkeye and stuff like that. They all are serious, but there's always that little bit of a one-liner there, isn't there, where they send themselves up or they have a joke or whatever. Now, that I don't think would have been possible if they hadn't have seen the way Robert Downey Jr. and the writers brought this to screen, because it was never heard of in superhero films to be this sort of light-hearted at times, but still get away with it, still get the message across that they're actually in a war. And I think that's very, very clever.
Yeah, you could well be right. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it like that before. I mean, each director, they've taken a chance on a few directors, and so a lot of the movies have a different tone down, and it's down to the director. But it could be that, they do have a directive from the studios, by the way, make sure you've watched Iron Man, make sure you get a little bit of fun in there. It could absolutely be the case. I mean, if you look at the movies, the Marvel property movies that came out before, the Spider-Mans, the X-Men's, there's a little bit of fun, but not to this level I don't think. They were quite serious, weren't they? So you either get, weird campy things like, Nick Fury Agents of Shield, or, super serious kind of X-Men movies, not a lot of humor. So yeah, but you might be right. He might have a bigger influence than even we realize.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I feel. I'm not saying I'm not trying to put words into your mouth. I just feel he was the template and blueprint for 10 years later why the MCU is what it is, Dave, and why in Disney they're building the Avengers and rides and everything else. I think he is the pillar with which all it was built. I know it sounds quite dramatic, that, but I do believe that.
Yeah, yeah. No, you definitely could be right. So I mentioned about, in the comics that they reimagine, they put Tony Stark in different locations depending on when they want to retell this story, what's going on in the real world. Okay, well, we'll set it there. So one of the things that has been a constant, though, is his ally. So Professor Ho Jensen. So he wakes up, he's in this cave, Tony's got this electromagnet, and it's stopping, these shrapnel shards from reaching his heart. I can't remember exactly what they call him, but he says, doesn't he, people talk about these things like, people are basically the walking dead. So if they've been hit by one of these things, it's just a matter of time. These shrapnel shards will go through your blood system and end up in your heart and kill you. So it's inevitable. So he's obviously had experience of this. So he puts this electromagnet in there and saves him. And we find out, this this terrorist organization, the 10 Rings, they're the ones who've captured Tony and also, Ho Jensen, he's fellow captive with him. And their leader, this Raza chap, tries to blackmail Tony into building a Jericho missile and says, if you build this for us, we'll let you go. But obviously, this isn't his experienced in the ways of the world, isn't he? He knows that as soon as he builds it, he's going to be killed. There's no way they're going to let him go. So he's already cooking up a plan on what to do next.
Yeah, and again, very clever, Dave. Very clever, and you get the vulnerability of Tony as well in this first 20 minutes because he's a prisoner of war, isn't he? He's in a war-torn country. He has no help. That's it, basically. He's fending for himself. And what makes me laugh is when he fits the heart to him, the false heart and everything to keep the shrapnel away, well, he's carrying a car battery round as well. He's just on the site, and they're forcing him to do it, forcing him to make this, this missile and all that. And it's brilliant. It's so well done. And the setting doesn't feel claustrophobic. It just feels like he is captured and that's it. So, no, I really like this opening, Dave. I think it's really one of the strongest superhero films we've seen, or I've seen up to this point anyway.
Yeah. And we get these flash forwards, don't we? So we see Tony as the person he was leading up to that period in the cave, so he is very much, his father was obviously very influential as that industrialist. He's very much, he enjoys what he does. He enjoys the lifestyle. He enjoys a few drinks. And you're seeing this kind of not unlikable person, but, very much he's in it for himself, isn't he?
So we pan back 36 hours from the sort of prisoner of war camp that Tony's in to get introduced to his mentor, Staines, played by Jeff Bridges. And you can tell straight away there's an edge to this character. He's supposedly got Tony's interests at heart and he's trying to get him more serious, and Tony's going to get this big illustrious award, but he's just not bothered. He's not bothered about any of this, is he? He's just a total playboy. He's got all sorts of women around him. He's just living the lifestyle basically, and he just doesn't care. He's very much in tone, as you've said, with the arrogance and sort of self-centeredness of Tony Stark at this point, which I think again, Robert Downey Jr. gets to take a lot of credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the comics, Obadiah Stane, he's part of a rival company, but in the movie they've kind of reimagined him as playing this mentor figure for for Tony. So yeah, I thought, and again, it just having someone like Jeff Bridges in your movie, I think just gives it an extra weight. And I have seen stuff from him since to say that, well, he didn't really like the way that they put the way they directed and produced the movie. So the scripts, in terms of the story, I'm sure it was fairly much, pretty much set in stone. But in terms of the dialogue, they were just asked to improvise a bit. So someone like Downey Jr., he's absolutely excelled at this, whereas Jeff Bridges, he wants to prepare, and go in knowing exactly what it is he's going to do. So I think he had a bit of an issue with that, but he ended up going in, and I only know this from looking at interviews since, because I think he gives a decent performance. And yeah, I think he said he eventually got his head around. He just thought, okay, so we're making a $200 million student film. Okay, let's do it then. But yeah, so so obviously knowing the character from the comics, I know where it's going to go. But in terms of Obadiah, but yeah, very much larging it up, isn't he, old Tony? And again, I think it's brilliant the way they flash back to let you know about, who is this Tony Stark, and then flashing back to the cave where, he's got his little design plans, and you can see he's got these different like architect diagrams, but when you overlay them, you can see the outline of this iron suit.
Yeah, and it's good again. It's building up nicely. The tension's there. Tony knows he's only got a small window, him and Yinsen, to actually get out, doesn't he? And sort of get away from these guys. He knows his days are numbered, don't they? And I've got to be honest, Dave, the only thing that was pretty obvious, you pretty much knew Yinsen's fate as this was going on, didn't you? He was a clever guy. He was a foil for Tony that needed him at the time, but you knew, I knew what was going to happen with him, if I'm being honest. And that's even from the first time I watched it, which isn't a call on the film, but you can just tell sometimes they're just plot devices, some of these characters. And it was interesting.
Yeah. Like I say, throughout, wherever his origin's been retold, this character is the same over and over. So whether it's Vietnam, the Gulf War, Afghanistan, it's always the same. He always meets his fate. So yeah, probably telegraphed in the film, but certainly if you know the comics, you know where it's going to go. And I did, again, I thought the story did a decent job in terms of telling us, these terrorists aren't very nice people, so when they've got the little they're going to drop a little coal down his throat. I thought that was all pretty sinister. But yeah, so they end up, I mean, the guys, they've got the cameras on them. The terrorists have got the cameras on Tony and Yinsen, but so they know something's going to go down, don't they? So they try and break in, and Yinsen goes off to buy him a little bit of time, doesn't he? And yeah, if you didn't know before where it's going to go, it's not quite a comedy moment, because ultimately someone getting slaughtered is not that funny. But when he runs around the corner, chasing after people with their gun, it just reminded me a bit of Star Wars. Where Han Solo's running after the stormtroopers and then runs into a bunch of them, and it's like, oh nope, start running the other way. It did remind me of that. So yeah,
very good. Yeah, very good analogy that, Dave, because the setting's quite claustrophobic corridor, isn't it? So yeah. Good spot. Yeah, and then obviously Tony, we're getting the old 100% downloading thing, aren't we, to get the suit active so the cores and that can become live, and literally he just makes it, done it the last seconds as he sort of comes through, and he just absolutely just starts pummeling people, doesn't he? He's in this massive hulking Ironman suit as such, or a prototype, shall we say, hybrid at this time. But brilliant again, really clever, Dave. Really, just a great all-round film, and there's not a lot of CGI with it, which is great. I think it's more believable that he has just concocted this very much, and it's more of a better version, but it's almost like the A-Team, the way he's put this suit together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's got the welding kit out and everything, and we're straight into it. But again, it's believable. It takes everything, doesn't it? You know, with the suit and literally, he has this battle and he gets away by the skin of his teeth, doesn't he? He just gets taken out as he's in the air. And and then we get the thing where the suit's scattered everywhere, don't they? Tony's lay on the floor in the desert, and then the army come, don't they, rescue him and stuff. And
yeah,
I thought that was great. That whole fight sequence was really, really well put together.
The only thing I'd say as a little nitpick is, when he so I love the scene. I completely agree. I don't think there is any CGI. I think it is all practical effects, and it looks like something you could have put together in that A-Team way, doesn't it? You know, but when he crashes into the sand, into the desert, I mean the parts are scattered everywhere.
Yes,
and you sort of think, well, if there was a mushy, soggy human being in the middle of that, you're not walking away from that. So I remember even from the first time, I thought that's a little bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, Dave, I swear to you, I was going to say that. I swear to you that when I watched it, I never noticed it before. I couldn't have even said the first time I watched it back in 2008-9 that I'd even noticed that, Dave. But when I watched it again the other day, that was the first thing in my head. I started thinking, logically thinking, well, if he's landed there, why is there not debris for miles back? If he's disintegrated that way, because it almost felt like the Blues Brothers when the car just implodes on itself. It was like, that doesn't make any sense. And the fact that he wasn't even injured other than a couple of bruises, I totally agree that was the only time where the continuity was not correct, because it just didn't make any sense. There was parts around him that probably weren't even on the suit. Totally agree with that. Totally agree.
Yeah, so they get picked up by the army again. It's quite handy that Colonel Rhodes, his mate, is one of the people who finds him. Again, I'll just park that, bit of a leap that he could be found, but okay. Now, when he goes back, he holds a press conference and he says, I want two things. I want an American cheeseburger and something else. I don't think they actually spell out what something else is. And I must admit, so I think I'd mentioned to you, I'm going ahead with this veganuary, just giving it a try, going vegan for a month. And but I must admit, every time I watch this, it does make me want a cheeseburger. But I have to tell you, so years and years ago, I was working. I used to do a little bit of work across in the Far East. Not for months at a time, just a few weeks at a time, and what have you. And I remember going into Taiwan, and so I don't know if you know Taiwan at all. You basically fly in. There was only one international airport, so you have to fly into Taipei, which is right at the north of the country, and then drive to wherever else you're going. And so I was working more down in the south, so it was about a 4-hour drive away, and you have to get a driver. You wouldn't dare drive there yourself, or I wouldn't. And I was there for a week, and this was proper Chinese food. I don't mean go down to your local Chinese takeaway in the UK and have some sweet and sour pork or whatever. This was proper like chicken's feet and proper Chinese food. And I tried a few things, but I was a younger guy then, and my stomach just couldn't handle it. So I ended up I tried stuff for 2 days, hadn't worked. I'd ended up, living for the rest of the week just on like rice. And there was this kind of like soy sauce. It was almost like a soy sauce gravy mix with bits of mince in and stuff like that. So a bit of that just over the rice. That was it for a good 4 days. And so gets back up to Taipei, where it's much more westernized, and there was a McDonald's there, and we'd driven past it on the way to check into the hotel. And when we got back there, I tell you, I can't remember how much food I ordered, but it was way too much that any one person should eat. But I remember I almost had my fingers off. As soon as I sat down, like 5 seconds later, there was no cheeseburger left. So I just think, again, only because of that experience, I just think, well, you've come out, you've been rescued, you're dying for a cheeseburger. There is no way I would last the rest of that car journey and be sat in the press conference and only having taken one bite out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a daft thing that jumps out. So maybe that was his fifth cheeseburger or something. I don't know, but yeah, just odd little thing to jump out at me.
No, very good, very good. And yeah, he does the press conference. In the press conference, he drops an absolute bombshell and decides to say, without consulting with Stain or any of the board of directors, we are moving out of the arms race. So Stain then is on damage limitation, arm across him. Tony's, he's going to get some rest. Tony's this, so we'll be in touch and we'll do this. And they're trying to get him off the stage, aren't they, as quick as anything? And Rhodes is watching and he's sort of smiling to himself like, what is going on here? And this is where all of a sudden Stain turns, doesn't he? He's gone from this too nice, too helpful assistant to all of a sudden you can see that he has got an ulterior motive, and that's where things start taking a bit of a sinister turn with him, and he reveals his hand as such after this press conference.
Do you think I don't think he reveals his hand until a little bit later.
No, he doesn't.
So what is it that he does that makes you think, oh, he's going to turn here? Because
the way they are, because they're arms dealers and stuff like that, yeah, they have a board of directors to promote and they've got to appease, and it's not just because he's got his name on it, he can't just make that decision. But it's the way straight away jumps on that. We're trying to sort of firefight the press conference. I knew straight away, watching from the first time, thinking, yeah, this guy's a baddie. I think it might be film fatigue, because pretty much that someone close to these people is usually a baddie somewhere on the line. There is a double cross somewhere. But I remember watching it in the cinema thinking, yeah, this guy's a baddie. And I don't know why. I don't know whether it's just stuck with me knowing, because the rest of the film. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I got out of that straight away.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because I would have thought that most of the people would have seen it. Well, Tony's very much the figurehead of the company, isn't he? But you get the impression Obadiah is the one who's really kind of pulling the strings behind. But yeah, I'd have thought most of the people watching the movie, without knowing the comics, would probably think, oh, he's just got his back. He's, again, Tony's just come back. He's traumatized, so he's not thinking straight. And again, you think of the practicalities. You got this huge company who makes who's an arms dealer, and then they're not going to make weapons anymore. So the stock price, the share price would go through the floor. Yeah.
No, that logically that makes complete sense, Dave. Complete sense. But like I say, it may just be being that film. What you watch that many films, you can see the formula. Taking shape. It could be me subliminally sending myself messages like, this is the turn in the film, sort of thing. I don't know.
Possibly, but I have to say, I think, the bit coming up now, there are lots of highlights, I think, through this film. It does lull a little bit later, but I think one of the highlights for me is when, you get to see more of him in his workshop, and he starts to build on these ideas that he's had in the cave, and built this Mark I suit, and he starts to build up, he builds himself a new arc reactor. He gets Pepper to replace it. Again, very realistic, I thought, the way, she was reaching into his chest and refitting that new arc reactor. He's building his, propulsion systems. It makes my kids laugh when he, when he throws himself into the ceiling pretty much because he's overshot how powerful his rocket boots are. But I just like that, you know, he's building up on these ideas, and he doesn't have it right first time, you know, and he tests it all on himself, and he's pretty reckless with it as well. So, you know, you get him flying into the air and he ices up, and then all the systems go down and he's plummeting to the floor, and, you know, eventually just gets away with it. So I really like this. You know, again, you might say it's a little bit of an A-team bit, but where he's building the suit up.
Yeah. It reminds me, Dave, quite a lot of the way in The Dark Knight, especially Bruce Wayne's character, where you can clearly see that Bruce Wayne absolutely hates himself for playing this playboy, you know, and he's trying to protect Harvey Dent and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's a very clever guy, Bruce Wayne, but he plays up to just the womanizing, absolutely, you know, when he takes the Russian ballet troupe off, doesn't he? So Rachel can't watch the Russian ballet with Harvey Dent and stuff like that. This is what Tony's doing. But when you see him in his actual, where he's comfortable, he's playing the same sort of character. This absolute horrible playboy who can have any woman he wants, or, you know, whatever he wants, and do whatever he wants. He drives recklessly. But when he's a scientist at heart. When he's a scientist, this is where I really like. I know there's a few jokes and laughs the way he is a testing experiment in that, but it shows that there is a good person in there as well, which I think is really good.
Yeah, and I think there's one key difference. I think Bruce Wayne, when he's playing that playboy, it is an act. You know, it's to throw people off the scent. I think Tony Stark, he really is. You know, certainly in this MCU, he is that playboy.
Yeah.
You know, but he does have good intentions as well. You know, he's had this life-changing experience where, you know, he thought through all his life, he thought they were building weapons for the US. And then he realizes that actually that's not the case, you know, and he saw these young Americans being killed with the weapons that were meant to protect them. So you know, that's had an absolutely profound impact on him. And he becomes that obsessive engineer, doesn't he? You know, and he's trying to build all this stuff. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, very good, very good. Again, and another layer onto the character, Dave. So fantastic. Now we go to the charity event. There's a part in it that we've alluded to before. He's one of the reporters actually says to him, don't they, that the Stark Industry name is on a lot of these weapons, don't they? You know, the 10 rings. The Stark weapons be delivered to the 10 rings, which is actually, that's the people who kept him captive, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. So, and again, he thinks that, you know, as soon as he said, then the company's not delivering weapons to anywhere. And you have this the young reporter who he'd spent a bit of time having a little bit of iron coitus with earlier in the movie, and she's got all these photos about them being delivered to the terrorists. And, you know, so again, he's not happy. He had turned up, hadn't he? They'd said on the news, you know, Tony Stark, he's got a bit of PTSD, so, you know, no one's heard from him, and we don't expect him to turn up, which is, you know, red rag to a bull. So it's like, right, well, I'm going to turn up then.
Yep.
And, you know, he shares a bit of a moment with Pepper, doesn't he, as well? But then as soon as he sees these pictures, he goes off. And I think for me, this is where Obadiah really shows his hand. And, you know, he says about the board were trying to put out an injunction on him. And he lets Tony know at this point, well, yeah, that was all instigated by me.
Yeah. Yeah, he has his arm around him as they're having a picture, doesn't he? And he says,
yeah.
And then Tony obviously goes back to his lab and gets the gear on, doesn't he, to go back to where he was held captive, basically, because you know, these villages and people who are being slaughtered and captured, imprisoned, and at the detriment to Stark Industries equipment, because it's basically, it's just a glorified arms deal. And what Stain is doing to the name of Stark, he's just trying to make a quick buck, basically, and be that supplier to the Middle East. So he goes, and absolutely, this is where we proper see Iron Man. He's already made a bit of a change to the suit, because the suit's now, you know, he's slimmed it all down. He's got the full red and yellow suit, and he's had a bit of a change. We get introduced a bit more to Jarvis as well, don't we? Which is Paul Bettany as well, who plays Vision in Avengers. It's definitely him. And he has a great battle then, doesn't he, with like these sort of henchmen and stuff who these terrorists basically are held in a family captive. They've got the dad on the floor, and he just comes down and just decimates them all. And he's got a nice little gun going there where he can actually target who the baddies is. It almost felt like I was playing a PS1 shooting game with a gun. The way he did that.
You get that point of view thing. Yeah, I have to say, I love this bit, because like you say, this is where we get to see Iron Man. And again, you just think with this movie, you've got that perfect storm. If you'd have done this a few years earlier, it's only, 10 years after Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yeah.
10 years, and 12 years after Generation X. If you'd have done it earlier, the effects would not have been as good. But you get this Iron Man, this golden red Iron Man, looking absolutely fantastic. And I just love the bit where, the tank sort of shoots at him and he just steps out the way and then shoots back at it and then just nonchalantly starts walking off, and behind him you see the tank blowing up. I just think that looks so good, and it's proper sort of punch in the air moment. And where he takes out, like you say, he's got little guns that shoot out of his shoulders as well. He's got all the tricks, hasn't he? And then the last guy, one of his captors, it's all a little bit convenient, isn't it? But he kind of throws his captor to the villagers so they can deal with him. Just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's only a few minutes long, this sequence, isn't it? But I just love it.
It's so effective, though, Dave. I remember seeing it in the cinema. I was blown away then, especially with the village and that, the way it's set. It's fantastic. He brings that superhero spin on just a total war zone. It's fantastic. Really well done and put together. And hats off to the production team to make it so real, because it was never filmed in Afghanistan. It was most of it was filmed on set. The location stuff wasn't even filmed in Afghanistan, even though it's depicted as that. So again, very clever set work and that again. But one thing as well, Dave, so we go for the whole scene. He saves his family and then he leaves, doesn't he, the leader of the 10 Rings, the guy who sort of tortured him and stuff. He leaves him to the villagers, basically, doesn't he, the one of the guys. And then just says he's all yours and then flies off, doesn't he? Now, when he gets back, there's a bit of an illusion. There's a bit of an incident early where Pepper gives him his original heart back, and it says a little thing on Tony Stark does have a heart.
Yeah.
Presentation thing, which pretty much says to you, is he going to need that later? Yeah, so obviously on his way back from the village, he's flying away, and with these two jets coming after him, and it's the old classic, we've got this unidentified bogey, what is it? We don't know. And the army are scrambling like mad, to find out what the heck this is. And there's a nice battle with him in there. And Rhodey, his friend, he's in there again in the war room with all the other colonels and all these other tech guys. And he brings Tony up, doesn't he? And Tony's out of breath when he's in the suit. And he's like, "You're out of breath." Yeah, I'm just training. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And it's really funny. Again, it's another play on what should be a serious thing. He's just decimated these sort of terrorists, hasn't he? And then he's also playing on the fact that he could be killed by these fighter jets, but he's just chatting away to his mate. And I love the phone, Dave. It's definitely a 2008 phone.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I love it when they're fighting and they're trying to get, because obviously he doesn't want to hurt the US Army. He's on the same team. They don't know who he is. And it's when he rings Rhodey back, and he's got Tony's face on the screen. I just thought that was brilliant. And he's ringing him from the iron suit while he's attached to the plane, because he disappeared at one point, didn't he? And attaches himself to one of the jets. I've just thought good. It was so good. And he saves one of the pilots as well, doesn't he? Obviously he accidentally takes the wing off one of the actual jets, and one of the pilots can't get his parachute out, can he? And they all think he's going to sort of die, and everyone's holding their breath. And at the last minute, Iron Man comes in, doesn't he, and punches the seat, and he flies in the air, doesn't he, and he's saved, sort of thing. But again, Rhodey pretty much knows now because of the conversation he's had with Tony. Tony's alluded to it, but not actually said it. He's come back with some smart comments to him that he's actually Iron Man.
He says, doesn't he? He says it's me. Says
Yeah.
the guy in the suit is me, you know. And he doesn't try to take out one of the jets, does he? But
No.
he ends up being shaken off, and I think, you know, he just takes the wing off the other one, and that's where he gets his little heroic moment. But yeah, I thought that back and forth was really good. So at this point, you know, Rhodey is the one who knows he's Iron Man. And then when he gets back, I do like, you know, this bit with Pepper. So the suit's not quite coming off as easily as it went on, and so Pepper walks in on him, you know, when he's trying to get the suit off, or the machine's trying to get the suit off, and he says, you know, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing. So, you know, now she knows he's Iron Man as well. So I thought that was pretty funny.
It's a funny line, that even to this day, it's still funny. But yeah, then we do get, as I mentioned earlier, David, you're correct. Stain totally reveals his hand now. We get 10 rings are there in the desert, in their sort of little concentration camp. And then all of a sudden, Stain comes through, doesn't he? Off out of his vehicle with soldiers around him. And he knows the ringleader, the guy who's captured Tony at the start, who, you know, obviously his face got disfigured.
Rather, yeah.
Yeah, rather. And he goes in then to a sort of tent with him, and they're discussing things with Tony. He sees the suit, doesn't he? Which obviously they're sort of trying to work out how he's put it together, because they've just put it together part by part, haven't they? They've got a couple of people there who obviously are some sort of scientists trying to read some of the plans and stuff. And this has gone on before that. And then Stain just has none of it, doesn't he, Dave? And he just takes him out in the end, doesn't he? And he walks off, and they come outside, and all of 10 rings are all on the knees now. All his soldiers have kept him, and he just says, well, like, finish it, doesn't he, or whatever. And they just kill them all. You don't see it, but it's just a total genocide of taking all these guys out.
It's a slaughter, isn't it? And I think at this point, you know, so when he revealed his hand to Tony, you think he's just a crafty businessman, whereas, you know, he doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. And I do like that little device where it just paralyzes people.
Yeah.
You know, so he'd paralyze Reza, and then you know, he's got his protective ears in. So again, it's sometimes there's dialogue, there's things in the story that, like you said, I mean, I didn't see it coming with the heart. You know, proof it, Tony's got a heart. I didn't know that was going to come into it later on, and with the paralyzing little device that he's got, you know, that's going to be used later on as well. For me, it just, I can watch it and enjoy this part of the story without thinking, oh, you're just ramming that down my throat, because you're going to use that later on as well.
Yeah. No. Again, Dave, it's not something where I sat there, you know, like picking holes in it. I just think maybe it's the first time I watched it, it's 10 years ago. So maybe it's just in hindsight now, watching it back, it's more obvious that was a plot device. You know, to someone, it might not have been as obvious to me 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Now, obviously, I'm knocking 40, Dave. You know, things aren't working like they used to, sort of things. Maybe my mind's playing tricks on me, but yeah, I agree. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic on it or sort of pick holes in it, because it's a cracking film. It's things now that, like you say, that the surprise element and the relaxed element of watching it again, because you've seen it before. You do analyze stuff, and obviously, as we're reviewing, we're analyzing stuff anyway, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, definitely watching it with hindsight. You know, you can't watch Sixth Sense now, can you, without going, hang about, no one's actually looking directly at him. But yeah, so when Staines gets back, I mean, he's after slaughtering the 10 rings, you know, he's trying to get his own men to rebuild the suit, isn't he? You know, and we don't see what is trying to be rebuilt there, but you can start to see his intentions and the fact that he is a bit bloodthirsty as well.
Yeah, so at this point, Pepper Potts, she comes into her own a little bit. She actually gets more than just Tony's sort of eye candy stroke PA, who he's flirty with throughout the film. She actually comes into it where Tony sends her off to get the files from Stane's computer. Now she gets into Stane's office and all this, and there's the old, again, 100% USB file gag, which builds a bit of tension. Stane comes in. As she's halfway through, she's got to keep him talking. Obviously, she's sat at his computer. She's like, he knows something's going on. You can pretty much tell. And just as he's about to get to the screen, it stops downloading and it's complete, basically. So as far as he knows, it's just got his picture, which is an old Ford hot rod on the front with the fire, which obviously Tony has that vehicle and used it for inspiration for the suit. And then as she goes off, she covers up a USB, walks out of the building. And as she's walking out, he looks on the computer quickly. She grabs the USB and sees that she's downloaded something. And he's angry then, Stane. And as she's coming out, she bumps into Agent Coulson as well. And Pepper's there. She informs of what's going on and all that stuff. And you pretty much know that things are going to start picking up from this point on. And it's good with Phil Coulson as well, because he's sort of trying to be a bit of an intermediary and trying to advise them that there's something going on. But his character becomes a bit more stronger in it. He's not just some guy who's there on Tony's shoulder trying to pepper his head. He's actually got valuable information to steer, well, and also to steer the plot of the film as well from from that point of view. Stane's got this suit being built. Now, this suit that he's building, which, he's using reverse engineering to sort of build it off what Tony had in the desert and stuff. Going through what the 10 Rings guys had put together and try to decipher what Tony had built off his plans. But he's huge in it. This suit he built, it's like, he reminded me so much of the Hulkbuster. It's massive. Mm-hmm. It's a lot bigger, which I like. How we say to you, I like the fact that the baddie has got to be bigger than the goodie as such in these things, because it's more of a challenge for him to overcome him. That they use this baddie sort of thing, or this character.
Yeah, so the Ironmonger, obviously, again, Obadiah Stane, they're right from the comics, and I think they do a really good job. So, I mean, what I was thinking as you were talking there is, who knew, Agent Coulson would go on to be such a pivotal character in that whole Marvel universe, because he just pops up on screen every now and then and says, I'm with the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division, and it's like, oh, everyone makes a crack, it's a bit of a mouthful, and he just plays kind of this minor role, doesn't he? And obviously, as the MCU has evolved, Shield's become a quite big part of it. It's not just the guys running around in tights and iron suits. I think they do a good job on the screen. So essentially, it all comes together that, the guys who are trying to build this Ironmonger suit for Obadiah, they can build all the suit, but what they can't nail is, how do you get this huge arc reactor technology into this tiny little thing, which will fit into into the suit, into the chest plate, if you like, in Tony's case, into his chest. And he says he was able to do it in a cave, and they're basically saying, yeah, but I'm not Tony Stark. So this is where you get he just immobilizes Tony, doesn't he, and steals his arc reactor straight out of his chest. And so again, I don't know, for the very first time, I was just going along for the ride. I'm thinking, right, he's stuffed then, And I guess what I don't think it conveyed, it almost suggests to me that it's like a pacemaker, the way he's crawling along the floor. But I think it's probably more just the after effects of this immobilizer, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Where he's on the floor, and I do like his little robot helper friend. Throughout the movie, when he was doing his testing and stuff, he'd fall through the ceiling, and then he'd go to put him out on fire without him actually being on fire and stuff like that. But he's the one who brings his arc reactor that he built in the cave to him, and so that saves the day. But what you have is Shield, Agent Coulson, Pepper, and Shield turn up to arrest Obadiah. But then that's where, he's now got his fully powered arc reactor, so he can power up the suit. And, when he powers up the suit, you do start to see, I mean, it reminded me a bit, when in Avengers Assemble, you had the Hulk running down the corridor chasing after Black Widow for one scene, and it's very much like it in this. You know, this Ironmonger suit, it is huge, isn't it? You know, and he does, as you like to say, Chris, he does start to take names.
I do indeed, Dave. Yeah, it's a good fight, though, isn't it? You know, Tony, he gives as good as he gets, but because he's got this, you know, he's got the prototype heart reactor in his chest, so he's not really a match for him as such, you know, because he isn't at full power. So obviously, physically, he can't keep up. He's got the better reactor in his chest, which is obviously Tony's design. So it is a good underdog fight, isn't it, between them, Dave? You know, and at the point where you think all is lost basically for Tony and Ironmonger's going to win, he's, you know, Pepper unleashes the electromagnetic surge, doesn't she? And he falls into the art, well, he falls into the art reactor to his death sort of thing, because he takes the front off it, doesn't he? Because Tony disables his the vision in the suit and stuff. So this
his targeting system, wasn't it? And I did like that again, because even in the heat of the battle, you know, you hear him say like, "Well, this looks important." So he's ripping all stuff out that, you know, as an engineer, he kind of knows what kind of looks important and whatever. So I kind of there's a bit of criticism in some of these films that basically the villain just reflects the hero. So, you know, the hero is a guy in an iron suit. So just have a villain that's that, but a bit bigger. But I don't know. I thought for the story, I thought it worked. I thought, you know, there was enough of a character there as well that you didn't necessarily have to kill him off. But I think, again, watching this for the first time, you grow up watching all these kind of comic book movies and TV shows and what have you, and you're like, well, just, you know, like Batman and the Joker in Batman 66, say, just kill him. You know, he comes back every week, you know, or you know, you get the same villains coming back. Just give them the put them down, you know.
Yeah.
And so to actually see him fall to his death there, I think was a bit of a shock for me. Yeah.
I think it validates the film, though, Dave, as well, because it's had an edge all the way through it. And obviously, by the way it opened with the soldiers getting killed, that's a bit out of the ordinary. We've seen it in the Batman series, but the Marvel stuff it's in its infancy at this point, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So it's quite good that they took that sort of dark tone, even though we have got the humor in it as well. So I think there was only one way for that to go, and that was the way to go. If he'd been a super being, as in a superhero being, not just a human who's maniacal, then fair enough. You carry him on, you arrest him, so there's a chance he might get out of jail or whatever you're going to put him, you know, a la like Arkham Asylum, stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I was happy with that way. And also it puts a full stop on him, and then it potentially could lead into whoever the next sort of challenge for Tony is, if there's other films, which obviously we know there is. But at that time, I think it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're probably right. And would they have got Jeff Bridges back? You know, probably not. So, yeah, I just thought killing him off, you know, I thought added a bit of realism to the whole thing. And so I know you're talking about a guy, you know, a superhero guy in an iron suit, but it all seemed, it's only a little bit of a stretch, isn't it? It all seemed quite plausible. So, yeah, no, I quite liked it. And essentially then you get into S.H.I.E.L.D. start to step up, don't they? And you know, they're with Tony, and they're giving him all these cue cards about what he says. And, you know, is it a training accident or something like that? They're saying, you know. But then, you know, for me, I remember my jaw being on the floor at the end where he delivers that line. He steps and, you know, he's saying, you know, clearly I'm not the superhero type, you know, it's not me. And then he just puts the cue cards down and says, I am Iron Man. And then, you know, you get a bit of Black Sabbath, don't you, in the background. The music just kicks in and we go to the credits. And for me, again, you know, all my life leading up to the point of watching that movie in the cinema, superheroes have secret identities. That's just the way it is. I'm not sure I even thought that deeply about, well, why do they have secret identities? Well, it's to protect the people they love and everything, but it just is.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I'm thinking, well, you've just snookered yourself. What are you doing? What are you going to do for a sequel now? Everyone knows your secret identity. So for me, that was quite mind-blowing at the time. And if you think about the MCU now, they don't really have secret identities, do they? Even though they have masks and stuff, everyone knows Captain America's Steve Rogers.
Yeah. I
think it was a very brave decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think the only one I can think of is still the old classic Spider-Man, because we get that in Infinity War, don't we? When things are kicking off, he gets his mates to distract everyone on the bus, doesn't he? And he runs off.
Yeah.
That's also to service the Spider-Man films. But you are correct, Dave. It's a very good spot.
And there's it's not quite the same, but in the Netflix universe, you've got Daredevil, who protects his identity, don't you?
Yeah.
There's a bit in Defenders where, he has to wrap Jessica Jones's scarf around his head.
Yeah.
She just says, "You look ridiculous."
Yeah.
But everyone else, their identities, their normal personas are right out there. So again, whoever made that decision, I think it was a brave decision.
But good. Because it makes you want, for me, it makes you want to see the second one straight away. I thought it was a great way to think. At the time, I thought, wow, this is going to be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it, in the of that first time of watching. And can I just confess something now, Chris?
Go on.
In this first movie, I didn't know there was an end credit scene.
I think, yeah.
Not at the time of watching it. So it was only after that I kind of heard about it. And I was like, oh, right. So I just wish I'd have stuck around for a bit longer, because that's where we get Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury popping up.
Yeah. Again,
and now that is really, for me, in that end credit scene, that's where the MCU's born. Because the whole movie, there's been no real, it's very much self-contained, isn't it?
Yeah.
Apart from S.H.I.E.L.D., you could say, I guess, because you don't, it doesn't have to be S.H.I.E.L.D. It could have been the FBI or something like that. But basically Nick Fury tells him, you're now part of a bigger world kind of thing. And, I think at this point, Marvel was still, this is why I say I think it was still an ambition, so they didn't want the Marvel universe to be a distraction from the story. So they wanted to make a self-contained story that could stand up on its own and then just edge their bets a bit. So, you're hinting at a wider universe, but it comes as an end credit as opposed to, trying to integrate it as part of the plot.
Yeah, no, it's a good spot, to be honest, Dave. And a good point as well. Very good point.
Should we go into our review then?
Let's go. So, Dave, I think it could be you this week.
Okay, well, I can never remember. There's something else I can never remember as well, but my mind's racing. So this movie, again, it's as we're talking about this now, it's 11 years old, and I've wondered. I have seen this multiple times. I think the rewatchability on this is very, very high. But as we've said before, when we look at these movies and we know we're reviewing them, you look with slightly different eyes, don't you? And so it was in the back of my mind, is this going to stand up? And I absolutely think it does stand up. I think the effects, to me, still look fantastic. In more recent times, we've got fancier ways that Tony can get the suit on, but I really like the way both in that Mark 1 suit, in the cave, and his Mark 2 suit where he's kind of got the little machine that helps him put the suit on. It all looks very mechanical, and you can sort of see how it's all fitting together and works. I just really, really like it. The portrayal of Tony Stark is so good. I mean, that is a 10 out of 10 straight there. And again, you think, who else could play Tony Stark as perfectly as Robert Downey Jr.? I mean, for me, the way Downey Jr. has played him, it's just set it's had an influence on the comics even. So the way I think Iron Man is written now, it reflects Robert Downey Jr. So I just think in terms of the characterization, I think he nails it. I don't think this is a popular opinion, but you know what? I think I prefer Terrence Howard as Rhodey. So I know there were the behind the scenes things on why he couldn't continue to play that character, arguments with the studio and obviously being the highest paid actor in the movie. I think I can see why it couldn't work, but I can go back and watch this movie and I like his portrayal of it. I think he balances that army, that military man, along with being the liaison and friend of Tony Stark. I think he nails that. And I just think it's a great movie. So I was toying, I was thinking to myself, hang about, I cannot send all of my favorite Marvel movies to Asgard, but I think it's got to go to Asgard.
Very good, Dave.
Now there are better Marvel movies than this, but I think I'm adding a weight into this as well because of what had come before and the significance, the cultural impact that it's had since 2008. I just think it deserves to be put up there. And so I guess do we want to say, Chris, actually, do we want to go through our scoring system?
Yeah, just before I go into mine, Dave, obviously we have a 5-point scale scoring system, which was born, and I can't take any of the credit for this. It was something we both agreed on. Dave come up with some fantastic names back in the conception of the podcast. So if it's an absolute world-class, top-of-the-tree film, TV show, whatever we're reviewing, it goes to Asgard. Dave, what's the next one?
If it's not quite at the pinnacle, then we go down, we move to Atlantis.
Yep. If it's middle of the road, it's not good, it's not bad, but still something that you're going to enjoy, we send it to the halls of justice.
And then if things start to get a little bit worse, we end up downgrading again and we go to Hell's Kitchen.
And if you ever hear on any of our reviews that we've sent it to the Phantom Zone, then literally do not watch it because it's our lowest score. There's always a caveat with the way we review it. There might be some things we say about the films, but that is the lowest score. So that is the review system, guys, that we use. So, if you need to watch these things, I'd love to listen to see what you think and what scores you come up with in comparison to myself and Dave.
Yep, absolutely. And if you want to email the show, you can get us at comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet us, reach out to us on Twitter at comicsinmotionp as well. And we'd love to hear your perspective and what our listeners think. Now, Chris, what do you actually make to this movie?
For me, it's an absolute flag bearer. And as I mentioned before, for the MCU, I think Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Iron Man, jokes, the vulnerability to the character is a template that they've used in pretty much every character that's come since, whether it's an origin film, it's an Avengers film. Anything within the MCU has followed this very, very loose guidelines. So like you look at Thor, Chris Hemsworth, it absolutely plays on that English accent he puts on, and even take the mick out of him in the Avengers. Tony Stark does it in the original Avengers, stuff like that. So I think the jokes, the wisecracks, there's a fine line between total parody and joke. Now, Thor Ragnarok probably has the most jokes in them. But again, I always come back to Iron Man because I know that this was something totally different back then. It was something that I'd not seen. It's something that really was probably more like the comics than anything else, you know, to send themselves up as people and as actors. It seemed to, there was no ego involved. It doesn't seem, even now that 10 years later, there's a lot of ego with Robert Downey Jr. He seems like just like a normal guy because of the stuff he's been through. So again, Iron Man was the pillar that built everything around it, the fortress around the MCU. And this as a film is fantastic, really good. I think the only thing I'd probably say again is Jeff Bridges as a baddie, he's pretty much run of the mill as a baddie, but he still does everything it says on the tin. You know, great film. Gwyneth Paltrow's good as Pepper Potts, Phil Coulson. We get the Nick Fury cameo there again. So for me, Dave, I am actually going to say it's a fantastic film, but I'm not sending it to Asgard. I'm going to send it to Atlantis simply for everything that you wanted in an Iron Man film. But I just think the baddie is just slightly weak at times. So Robert Downey Jr., watch it for his performance alone, but Atlantis.
Yeah, and I can't argue against that. I think you saying about, you know, this movie provided the template for the MCU, it's hard to argue against that because there has been a lot of criticism with the Marvel movies, as great as I think they are, and you know, I think they're widely considered the best. You know, there's lots of Warner Brothers DC fans out there who probably disagree with that, but I think in terms of the overall population, they're considered at the top of the tree right now. But where they have criticism, it's that the baddies are just pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
With the exception, we've talked about D'Onofrio's Kingpin in the Daredevil series. We've talked about Thanos. So there are exceptions, but the rule is, you know, it's about the hero's journey. And typically, you know, they don't have someone who can stand up to, say, you know, Heath Ledger's Joker. So I think that's a fair criticism. And I was umming and ahhing, quite honestly, between Atlantis and Asgard. You know, if I woke up on a different day, it's one of those 49%, 51% things. It's just in Asgard for me. Yeah. And like I say, the waiting, the thing that tips it over the edge is just what it meant after.
Yeah.
You know, and the significance that it's had.
I'm the same. I was umming and ahhing, Dave, but, you know, I think Infinity War takes a lot to beat, but there won't be an Infinity War without Iron Man, so... You know, but yeah, great reviewing, Dave, and a great episode of chat as well. So, Dave, I want to thank you this week. Been a great episode, another great property to review. But please give us some rubbish, Dave, in the next few weeks.
So I am gonna possibly sample that little bit of audio that you've just given me there. So please give me something rubbish to review. I think the phrase or the adage is, "Be careful what you wish for." So as we discussed, I think next week we'll have to look at Unbreakable because I think Glass is, you know. So this is all Samuel L. Jackson. I want to say Burt Reynolds, but not Burt Reynolds. Well, why am I forgetting names? Die Hard. Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis.
Same number of syllables. Bruce Willis. So Samuel L. Jackson, Bruce Willis, and James McAvoy. So yeah, we've got the next couple of weeks sewn up. We've got a few things dropping on Netflix. So Titans has just dropped. We've got Punisher coming up. So I don't know. We might have to record a bit of a bonus one where I throw in a bit of a stinker for you. But let's see, shall we? So I don't know. We'll figure something out. But I receive your wish, and your wish is my command, is the thing the old genie used to say, isn't it? So So yeah, thanks very much for that, Chris. And all I'll say is, how are you going to lead us out?
Only one thing to say, Dave. I am Iron Man.
That's how Dad did it. That's how America does it. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Is it cool if I take a picture with you?
Yes, it's very cool. I don't want to see this on your MySpace page. Please, no gang signs.
Fantastic. I'm just not the hero type, clearly, with this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I made. Truth is, I am Iron Man.